In the late 19th century, a man looked beyond a morning mist rising along the shore of an Indiana lake and had a vision which would be realized beyond his dreams. Wander now through the early years and see how from humble beginnings and a great faith in the American dream, this place we call Culver began. Henry Harrison Culver, an Ohio farm boy, merchant and manufacturer, arrived on the shores of Lake Maxinkuckee in the closing years of the 1860s and quickly embraced it as a special place in his life. Already a popular summer resort, the lake began to attract large numbers of visitors after 1883, when the Vandalia Railroad began service into the community. Always the entrepreneur, Culver acquired over 200 acres of land on the lake's north shore in 1883, and in 1889 decided to open a summer Chautauqua similar to the one so successfully operated in New York State. He called his development the Culver Park Assembly Grounds, and thereon built a series of canals and lagoons, landscaped the area, and constructed a fine three-story hotel on the site now occupied by Main Barrack. A tabernacle just to the east of the hotel provided a forum for distinguished religious and inspirational speakers like DeWitt Talmage, E.O. Excel, and the Reverend Sam Jones. The Chautauqua, despite large crowds, was financially unsuccessful and was abandoned. For a brief period, part of the Chautauqua served as the Marshall County Fairgrounds, but Culver's dream to start a school was about to be realized. In the spring of 1894, he employed an Episcopal priest, the Reverend J.H. Mackenzie, as principal, assembled a cadre of young men, and made plans for the Culver Academy's opening on the 24th of September, using the hotel as its headquarters. The first corps of cadets was small, numbering only 45. Students lived in the hotel, where they also attended classes and took their meals. The tabernacle, no longer needed for speechmakers, was converted into a drill hall and gymnasium. On the afternoon of February the 4th, 1895, a cry of fire went out, and cadets were rousted from the hotel, where they stood helplessly as it burned to the ground. There was no loss of life, but virtually all personal belongings were destroyed. Within 24 hours, Henry Harrison Culver and his architect, Albert Nell, arrived at the campus from the family home in St. Louis and began to conceptualize a new building design for the academy. It was conceived as a completely self-contained unit with cadet quarters, a mess hall, classrooms, a central heating plant, and generators to produce electricity for the entire campus. 8 months later, a 3-story fireproof brick, concrete, and steel structure, Main Barrack, became the Culver Military Academy's first major building and was open for occupancy by the Reverend Mackenzie's successor, Major Clinton Tebbets, a West Point graduate in the class of 1870. His corps of cadets had shrunk to 32, and guard mounts rather than parades had become the order of the day. 1 year later, on the 24th of September, 1896, a tragic fire destroyed the facilities of the Missouri Military Academy in Mexico, Missouri, and Colonel Alexander Frederick Fleet, its 49-year-old superintendent, was left with a student body of 72 and no facilities. Culver had Main Barrack with space for 90, but only 29 in the corps. Henry Harrison wired Fleet, "You have the boys, and I have the buildings. Let's get together." 12 days later, Fleet arrived with his cadets and most of his staff at the Vandalia Railroad Depot in the sleepy community of Marmont, Indiana, a town which the following year was to honor Henry Harrison Culver by adopting his name. The new arrivals carried their baggage past the ice cream stand, down to the lake, then along the boat pier, and onto the steamers which served the local and resort traffic. Cruising along the North Shore, they passed the dancing pavilion near the town park, then the Lakeshore Hotel, and finally the Parma House, later known as either the Maxencucky or Culver Inn. The new cadets disembarked at the Academy landing, moved into the new barrack containing classrooms, well-decorated quarters, dining facilities for the entire corps and faculty, an infirmary, and even a library complete with vaults fireplace. In January of 1897, 22-year-old Major Lee R. Ginlett joined fleet staff as Commandant of Cadets only months after graduating from VMI. His remarkable promotional talents and a vision for the future melded with those of Henry Harrison Culver and his two sons, Edwin R. and Bertram B. As a result, in March of 1897, the Academy purchased the Black Horse Troop from the Ohio National Guard in Cleveland. Shortly after that unit appeared in William McKinley's first presidential inauguration. The horses were shipped by rail to the Academy and stabled in one of the old Marshall County Fairground barns at the north edge of the campus. Within hours, the Culver Black Horse Troop was mounted and formed into ranks. In early May of 1897, the new troop made its initial appearance at the Grand Army of the Republic's encampment in Richmond, Indiana, serving as guard of honor for Governor James A. Mount. The effervescent Ginlett took the opportunity to invite Governor Mount to visit Culver at its commencement celebration, and during June week, the governor and his staff honored the Academy with its first official military review. Enrollment moved upward in 1897 to 158 cadets, and a second facility, West Barrack, with accommodations for 54 cadets, as well as physics and chemistry labs, was constructed next to Maine. The following year, the first riding hall was built just north of the Oval, near the site of today's Memorial Chapel. The exhibition area, 220 feet long, was spanned by 104-foot steel beams. Arc and incandescent lighting was enhanced by 1,000 square feet of window lighting set in the ceiling. This imposing structure was to serve the troop until 1915, when fire destroyed all 66 mounts in a nearby stable. The Culver family then decided to build a new riding hall further to the east and remodel the old facility into a dramatic recreation building. Here, a wide variety of intramural athletic activities, motors classes, and boxing took place until December of 1922, when it burned to the ground in a late afternoon fire. Enrollment showed promise of an even greater increase, and in 1899 the school opened with 242 cadets and a fourth new building, East Barrack. Dr. Ray, the Academy surgeon, moved into a 4-room infirmary, and the library expanded into a first-floor area which today is occupied by the President's office suite. In 1902, the gymnasium was constructed. This splendid facility stood for 3 years, then was burned to the ground. The Culver family ordered it rebuilt exactly as before, and in 1907 it was fully operational. It was known to latter-day cadets as the Little Gym. Over the Thanksgiving weekend of 1977, it fell victim to a late evening fire. Main Barrack underwent a facelift during the school year 1902-1903 when a 4th floor was added. The new space was dedicated primarily to classrooms and laboratories until the late 1950s, when the area was converted into student rooms. By 1904, the enrollment exceeded 300, and South Barrack was added, and 4 years later, the Academy Hospital was opened for the school year 1907-1908. In 1908, Albert Nell departed from his traditional design concept to build a concrete block building for the Academy Arsenal. Located north of Main Barrack, it was converted into the uniform, tailor, and dry cleaning shop in 1916. In 1910, Gillette succeeded Colonel Fleet as superintendent and began a 29-year career which was to bring momentous growth to the Academy. That same year, a building which was to last for only 21 years before falling to the Wreckers' Ball made its debut. Its short life belies both an interesting design and a health philosophy. Convinced that lots of fresh air reduce medical problems, the Academy constructed the open-air barrack north of the little gym. Each bed was enclosed in an alcove. Once a cadet had retired, he would pull a rope which lowered an inside window and another which raised the outside one. Fresh air and the elements surrounded the sleeper but could not enter the room. It was demolished in 1931. The Tabernacle building, which once served as the gymnasium, was converted to the mess hall in 1905. As enrollment grew, it proved inadequate, and in 1909 contracts for a new mess hall were let. Excluding furnishings and equipment, this revolutionary structure cost $86,600. It was formally dedicated in April of 1911 with Governor Thomas Marshall as guest of honor. Following the dedication of the mess hall, the power plant, which had operated for 18 years in Main Barrack Annex, was abandoned, and new generating facilities were constructed several hundred yards to the north. In 1930, this facility was converted into the Music and Arts Building when the power plant moved to its present location west of Academy Road. In 1913, the focal point of the campus shifted from Main Barrack to the new administration building, while the old Tabernacle was razed to make way for North Barrack. Henceforth, Sallyport and the Message Center became the center of Academy life. The year 1913 also marked Culver's participation in its first presidential inauguration, serving as guard of honor for native Hoosier Vice President Thomas Marshall. Less than a month later, cadets participated in the heroic rescue effort in the Logansport flood. In 1914, that city contributed and dedicated a major Academy landmark, Logansport Gate, honoring the Academy and cadets for their contribution to a population in peril. In the years leading to the Great War, major construction included the Arsenal in 1915, the new riding hall in the early winter of 1916, the English and mathematics buildings located north of the mess hall, and in 1917, the natatorium with its spectacular 60 by 120-foot pool. Peace and general prosperity in 1919, coupled with the jubilation of victory, brought a spurt in enrollment. The construction of Argonne and Chateau Thierry barracks, dedicated to American victories in France, raised Culver's attendance to a record 722 cadets. The loss of the first recreation building in 1922 took Albert Nell back to the drawing board. In 1924, the splendid rec building was formally dedicated by Edwin R. Culver. Built in the traditional Gothic Tudor style, its 50,000 square feet of floor space provided for a variety of school activities, including athletics, social events, and academic needs. Until the construction of the chapel in 1951 and the Epley Auditorium in 1959, it also served the religious and cultural needs of the Corps. Dedication of the Legion Memorial Building in 1919 and its formal opening in 1924 provided the capstone for the first 30 years of Academy growth. This magnificent facility, containing alumni accommodations, meeting spaces, and a library, was to become a living monument to the heroes of Culver who had served in the Great War. The Academy's growth in only 3 decades had been nothing short of dramatic. The land which Henry Harrison Culver had challenged in the closing decade of the 19th century had been changed forever. From the Riding Hall to the Legion Memorial Building, the heart of the institution had been laid upon the old Chautauqua campground, and Culver's castle in the air was grounded firmly in the bedrock of the 20th century.